It's been over 20 years since Ratchet Clank first appeared on the PlayStation 2 in 2002. Since then, we have all joined the iconic duo through many adventures on every single PlayStation console and handheld. And after all this time, the series is still going strong and relevant with its most recent appearance on the PlayStation 5 with Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. So it's clear that players and Sony are still interested. Even original developer Insomniac Games continue to make Ratchet & Clank games. While they have gone on to make other games like Resistance and Fuse, with their focus currently on Spider-Man and Marvel, it's amazing that they are still passionate enough to continue the series. This is vastly different than fellow PS2 platformers Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper. Once Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch was done, they moved on and both of those series sort of just died off. So Insomniac Games continuing to develop more games, despite it slowing down significantly in releases, is a good sign. Now, I love the Ratchet & Clank series. Ever since I was introduced to the duo on the PS2, I've joined them on every single adventure since. Through the highs, the lows, and the more questionable games, I've never been truly disappointed playing. Despite my love of the series, there's one thing that continues to bother me, and that's a certain storyline that has gone on for far too long. See, when the series made the jump from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3, it not only took advantage of the newer generation, but fully realized the characters and the world with a Pixar-like quality, and also became more personal. The Future Saga consisted of 3 games: Tools of Destruction, Quest for Booty, and A Crack in Time. These are the games that would dive deeper into the history of both Ratchet and Clank. This marked a huge shift in the series. These games were no longer edgy. These are no longer simple, witty characters, but beings with a backstory and a reason for why they are the way they are. There's a reason why Ratchet is alone and one of the few Lombaxes left. There's a reason why Clank was a defect in the robot factory. Tools of Destruction would focus more on Ratchet's story and the history of the Lombaxes, while A Crack in Time focused more on Clank and his destiny. This was a trilogy where emotions ran high, relationships were tested, and ultimately ended in a way that maybe wasn't entirely positive, but was needed. I've always believed that the origin storyline should have ended with Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time. That was clearly the big finale for the trilogy. We learned about both Ratchet and Clank on a personal level, and even though Ratchet didn't get his happy ending and had to sacrifice what could have been, he accepted this and it was time to move on. And that's what Insomniac would do. They had the experimental titles of All for One and Full Frontal Assault, maybe not the best in the series, but interesting. Then Insomniac would close out the PlayStation 3 with Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus, which acted as an epilogue to the Future Saga. It was a good game, very short, but its ending is one of those endings that sort of erased something good in A Crack in Time, and decided to, once again, continue that Future Saga storyline of Ratchet trying to find the Lombaxes, which would also continue into Rift Apart many years later, which at least from the end credits of that game, feels like we are finally going to be going somewhere with this story. And this leads us to the Insomniac Leaks. Back in December 2023, hackers from a ransomware group demanded for Insomniac to pay them $2 million in Bitcoin. Of course, Insomniac refused, and the group released over 1.67 terabytes of data they had stolen from the studio onto the internet while selling others. While it is a major blow to the company, especially with the private information of their employees out in the wild, it also gave us insight to what Insomniac has been working on and what they have planned for the future. Most of this deals with Marvel since the Spider-Man games have been super successful. So, Spider-Man 3, a surprise Venom spin-off, we know of a cancelled online game called Spider-Man: The Great Web, a very early playable version of Wolverine was discovered, and we also now know of a potential X-Men game. There are documents, images, videos, spoilers, things none of us should know about, yet it's so interesting and exciting to dive into. Sony has taken action, so a lot of this isn't available to find anymore, but the amount of projects Insomniac is working on is just astonishing. But after learning about the timeline of planned releases, at the end of it all, we finally have news on a new Ratchet & Clank game, which is good. The bad, it won't be until 2029. That means it would be an 8-year gap between Rift Apart and this new game. And this likely would be a PlayStation 6 game. This could always change. We could get the game sooner rather than later. Ultimately, this is more of an estimation for Insomniac to work towards than a date that's set in stone. But going from so many releases on the PlayStation 3, maybe even too many, to watching the series only have one game on the PlayStation 4, and so far only one on the PlayStation 5, it's a bit sad to see. Insomniac, like any other developer out there, deserves a chance to move on and experiment with other games, and I'm glad to see them gaining massive success from Spider-Man. After all, it's pretty much what made Sony buy them, but Ratchet & Clank has sort of been pushed to the side. However, with the leaks, there's actually a lot to look forward to. We know the story revolves around Ratchet, Rivet, and the gang find the Lombaxes in this mysterious high-tech society inside of a containment field. Basically, a giant city in a bubble. Of course, nothing is perfect in this society, and some sort of dark matter is involved, which introduces us to our villain, a brand new villain that we don't know the name of, but we do know that they were a former scientist who became consumed by this and was changed by Rift energy. As we can see in this piece of artwork, the group is working together to try and take down something called a beastly Lombax, who is working under the villain. And oddly enough, the head of this Lombax has the head of Alistar Azimuth, which if you played Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time, you'll know he played a significant part in its story. So that in itself really brings some important questions. It also appears that Insomniac will be trying to reinvent combat. So in this one scene, the group is fighting in the mountains and the team wants to make sure weapons interact with the environment. So for instance, Rivet could cause an avalanche to wipe away enemies. A co-op element will also be featured. Rivet would be on the offensive, shooting and hitting enemies, while Kit would act as support, creating a defensive shield to block attacks. It's been time for Insomniac Games to move Ratchet & Clank into a new direction, and this sounds like the direction the series needs. By the time the newest game comes out, this storyline would have lasted for over 20 years, one that started all the way back in 2007, and that's insane to think about. We don't even know if the new game will end the story, or just be another step in the Lombax saga. Originally, this video was going to be about ending the Ratchet & Clank series itself, mainly because of how drawn out the series has been and Insomniac's focus being elsewhere. I would like to see a nice conclusion, but I believe there is still more Ratchet & Clank can do, and in doing so, I think the series needs to reinvent itself, much like it was trying to with A Crack in Time. And I hope the final product shows this whenever it comes out. Do you think it's time for this Ratchet & Clank storyline to end, or should the series end completely? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell to be notified about future content. If you enjoyed this video, you might like this other video on the weird mashup that was PlayStation Move Heroes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.